Do you think there's a point where emergency funds are no longer necessary? To explain, I've always had an emergency fund worth about 6 months of our expenses, about £12,000. I have however been reconsidering whether that is necessary or not once you have a decent SS portfolio and access to credit. My thinking is I'm probably better off investing the emergency fund in a world tracker apart from about £2,000. If anything happens, I can stick about £50,000 on credit cards and can liquidate some investments to cover costs. I understand that value might drop, but equally it can go up, and if we are ever in a scenario where a global tracker fund goes to zero, I doubt the emergency fund will be of much use. I'll preface this by saying that we're two working adults in completely different industries. We have over £150,000 in SS ISA and our mortgage payment is only £1,000, which is why I believe we can take the risk. I still think an emergency fund is necessary when you're starting off and until you are in quite a comfortable position. I see lots of posts like this. It all boils down to people not understanding what emergency means. If I lose my job, my partner earns enough I can use credit cards. If I lose my job, if there's a recession and I lose my job, I can just sell my shares, etc., etc. Nobody seems to figure out that if you have plans that will cover an eventuality, it's not an emergency. Liquidity is key when the shit hits the fan, which is why cash is king, even if it means you're missing out on investment returns for a bit of your emergency fund. Why not just reduce it to 3 months of minimal expenses rather than 6 months? I think you might be at the point where it makes sense to look at offset mortgages and keeping your emergency fund in the account attached to your mortgage, certainly. Probably. When you're a millionaire and all your emergency cash flow issues are covered by insurance and passive income. The issue of investments falling isn't about them going to zero, it's that you end up crystallizing losses. Let's say the market dips by 30, then before it recovers, your boiler breaks and you need to pay £5,000 to repair it. Your broken boiler is effectively costing you £7,000, as that's the cost basis of the investments you're selling to pay for it. It's all really comes down to how fast you can access the month you have in whatever form it's currently being held in. If it's near enough instant with very little loss, then you could consider that your emergency fund. But if it requires a couples of days to access, you could be up a creek without a paddle. By the sounds of it, you're reasonably stable, but there have been more unexpected things happen than you can ever plan for. You already have 150k invested, you already have a mortgage. There is no reason for you to not have an emergency fund. That 12k can be put in an easy access savings account, and it's still working for you. You need to have liquid money just in case shit hits the fan. Using credit to fix it is temporary, it means you will have to take out money from your investments. Depends on your liabilities. Barclays Rainy Day Saver does 5.29 up to £5,000, so I'm not losing out keeping it somewhere I can instantly access. Someone with a mansion to keep up with might need a bigger fund though. Maybe go halfway house and keep 6k easy access? No. I know exactly what you mean about the internal pressure to invest it instead, but it's protection against total disaster. If you've calculated a 12k emergency fund is right for you, I'd stick with it. I'm comfortable, but I needed money last year. I had to sell some shares at 50 of their previous month's value. It was a big loss. I keep more cash now. I think you have to make the mistake for yourself to really learn it. People may not recall the crash of 07-08, but there were many people who had 2 jobs but suddenly found all of their savings worth significantly less and unexpectedly unemployed. Even if your investments weren't completely wiped out, you'd have to crystallize your losses in such a scenario. As many people have commented, the emergency fund is there for certain liquidity in case of an unforeseen event. A big flaw here: SS are a long-term investment. Liquidating it to cover an emergency fund will not only lose any investment but also any compounding interests building up over the investment. To ref emergency fund needs to be instant availability. If you have a sudden emergency, you're talking weeks to make SS liquid. If you need emergency plumber etc., may not accept credit card. With current easy access savings around 5, I'd stick with that. 5 guaranteed growth is much better than risking your emergency fund in the stock market. With inflation this high, your emergency funds are losing 10 of their purchasing power every year, and that effect will compound. This is the emergency. Just bear in mind a stock market crash could happen along with a household financial emergency. In that scenario you'd be screwed. Given you can actually earn decent interest now, albeit not as high as stocks and shares expected return, I think no reason not to have some in the bank account. More based on what's the reasonable worst thing that could go wrong and require immediate cash, rather than 3-6 months expenses though. Agree, there is a point where cheap credit facilities negate the necessity of holding cash. What's the point when you can earn 4% interest on the emergency fund? It would have made more sense to do this years ago, or in a few years, but not now. You have over £150,000 in ASSI, so you're probably not going to see a massive uplift by putting an additional £10,000 in there. If you had a couple £1,000, I could understand your point, but you've already got a lot of money invested. Interest rates are pretty attractive at the moment, so stick it in an instant access high interest account. You can find the latest ones on Money Saving Expert and enjoy the peace of mind of having easily accessible lump sum, smiley face. Ultimately it comes down to how you value your peace of mind knowing that you have that extra buffer, versus the marginal difference in returns having an extra £10,000, £12,000, £2,000 invested rather than held as cash. In the current environment I'd rather have the cash. You can easily earn upwards of 3-4 in an easy access account, so it's not like it's sitting doing nothing. And the extra liquidity means you can act quickly if a good investment opportunity comes along. It's not just about emergencies. I guess what's the point? Isn't the investment income from that 12k so small it's basically a rounding error at that point? You can't pay mortgage or direct debits or bills with credit cards. You could with an overdraft, I suppose. There is no guarantee that a global tracker will perform better than cash. Having £12,000 in cash gives you some diversification. With £162,000 of investments, I don't think having £12,000 is unreasonable. Having said that, you could easily convert the global tracker into cash in an emergency. I always like to have a reasonable amount in cash. You never know what the equity markets will do. If there is a sudden crash of 25 or more, you have cash to invest when the market is cheaper. I particularly like to have a few gold coins as emergency funds in inflationary times. They can be converted to cash immediately with minimal losses. I bought my Britannia coins 5-6 years ago for less than 1k and they're worth 1.5k each. I wish I could afford to save up an emergency fund, but my finances are always in emergency. I thought you were going to say you made GBP 8k a month in a safe job, so you would only be illiquid for a month if anything went wrong. Or that your GBP 150k portfolio was play money in a year. That would be the point where a GBP 2k cash cushion is fine. If your life savings are 100 equity, your strategy is buy and hold, not sell in an emergency and risk wiping out your retirement and credit score. An emergency fund is there so you can pay all your bills if you lose your job, without having to sell down your volatile high-risk assets. If you have a partner who could cover all the bills while you search for work, then maybe you can be leaner. I've personally used my entire emergency fund, about 12 months critical expenditure, in an ISA to buy high coupon gilt, maturing before my next remortgage, and I'll be recycling the coupons into equity. My emergency fund is a credit card and a tent. Sadly, no. But thankfully-ish, instant access savings accounts today can give you not terrible returns. I've never had an emergency fund. Never found it necessary.